Hello again to another video of Vaga Calero, as in me. And today we'll be watching the dark secret behind Japan's 0% homelessness rate by Explained with Dom. I don't think I've ever seen anything from that man, I presume. Let's just jump into it. Yeah. I'm very interested in Japan, so yeah, why not?
In the many ways that Japan stands out, there is one particular statistic that completely sets it apart from any other country in the world. Despite being one of the most populous nations, it is the only country in the world that has a homeless population rate of almost 0%. While the United States is experiencing a major homelessness crisis with the number of people living on the street rising every year, Japan seems to have found the solution to a societal issue that was thought to not really have one. But if you look past the headlines, the situation starts to look very different. The reality behind this seemingly amazing success reveals a disturbing and dark reality about what life in Japanese society is like and what is really going on under the surface. So how did Japan manage to have 0% homelessness rate? And why is it actually not good news for the country? This is the dark secret of how Japan solved homelessness. According to official statistics, Japan, a country with over 125 million residents, has around 3,000 homeless people, about 0.003% of its population, which is way less than other countries with low homelessness rates like Switzerland and miles ahead of countries like the US. But why exactly? Well, there are several reasons that are often mentioned as the cause of this extremely low rate. So first, being homeless is actually very difficult in Japan, and in the Japanese culture, it is incredibly stigmatized. According to a founder of a non-profit organization that's supporting the homeless in Japan, there is no culture of compassion for homeless people in the country, and they are usually seen as people who only have themselves to blame for their situation, and who deserve no help at all. This is even stronger because the majority of homeless in Japan are men, who are traditionally expected to be self-reliant. And their failure to do that is seen as an embarrassment, both by the public and by themselves. As a result, the authorities tend to make it harder to actually be homeless than in most countries. Any kind of begging in the public is banned by law. Homeless people tend to be pushed out of sight, and cities like Tokyo are known for implementing what's been called anti-homeless or hostile architecture. Like parks that are locked at night so that people can't sleep there, or benches and other city features that are specifically designed to make lying, sleeping, and prolonged sitting on them uncomfortable in order to discourage homeless people from staying in the area. And so making it both difficult and socially unacceptable to be homeless contributes to the low rate, as it is something most people try to avoid at all costs. What also helps are some of Japan's unique policies that, while not designed to reduce homelessness, helped to do it anyway. Japan has very strict laws on basically any drugs other than alcohol, and very severe punishments. And as a result, only 1.6% of the Japanese population tried drugs other than alcohol in their lifetime, compared to 46% of Americans, which means that drug addiction in Japan is barely an issue. And according to Tom Gill, a Japan-based social anthropologist, this is another key factor. At the same time, Japan has a very robust healthcare system, which is also significant, since 30 to 35% of people who experience homelessness in the United States have a mental illness. And while in Japan, people with severe mental illnesses tend to be placed in mental health institutions, in the United States, they often end up on the street. And finally, Japan has relatively accessible housing because it builds more houses than any other developed democratic country. Unlike most Western countries where building housing became increasingly difficult due to various regulations, Japan took the opposite route, and it has very few restrictions, making it very easy to build anything, and making it relatively affordable. So that all sounds great, and on the surface, Japan can be an example of a country that basically managed to solve a major social issue. Except that's not really true. Despite the official numbers, the reality is a lot more grim, and there are many more people without a home in Japan, but they are hidden away from sight and government statistics. So how is that possible? As you might have seen in another one of my videos, in the 1990s, Japan experienced a severe economic crisis when the stock and real estate markets collapsed. In the following years, it became extremely difficult to secure a steady, regular job with a decent pay, and so millions of people were left to survive on low-paying temporary part-time jobs. Many of them never managed to recover, and they became known as Japan's lost generation. People with no status, no place in the society, and no future. As a consequence, many of them were not able to hold down an apartment and pay rent every month, even in a relatively affordable Japan. But at the same time, they would do anything to avoid living on the streets, in order to avoid the shame and stigma from the society that comes with it. And so the phenomenon of cyber homeless emerged. Basically, Japan has a wide network of 24-hour internet and manga cafes, where people pay by the hour and can stay as long as they want. And since the 1990s, many of members of Japan's lost generation have begun using them as temporary shelters. They don't have beds, but people often sleep in the computer cubicles. And over time, the cafes expanded their services to offer food, drinks, fresh underwear, or showers. Gradually, this became an industry of itself, and today the cyber cafes are basically a uniquely Japanese concept of commercial homeless shelters, ones that you have to pay for yourself, which is, by the way, not even that cheap. Prices for an overnight stay in a small booth cost somewhere between $17 to $28. The netcafe refugees, as they are known in Japan, often have some kind of a low-paying part-time or temporary job that doesn't pay enough to rent an apartment, but they can afford to pay for a few hours in an internet cafe every night. These netcafe refugees are homeless. They don't have a home or a permanent address, and they're excluded from many aspects of life. But they don't look like it. They don't sleep outside. They work, and they do everything they can to maintain a clean-shaven, polite, well-kept appearance, to avoid the shame that comes with being homeless in Japan. That's why the government statistics of homeless people in Japan are considered wildly underestimated. Non-government organizations estimate that the real numbers of people living on the streets in Japan is at least 3 times higher than the government says. And that's even without taking in account the cyber homeless, people staying in internet cafes on most nights for at least few hours. If they would be included, the real number would be radically different, since in 2020 it was estimated that
as always, I already have to fix my Bluetooth connection because this knocking out those cables and stuff like that every time is just becoming really annoying. Alright, and let's keep going.
15,000 people lived in cyber cafes in Tokyo alone, 5 times as many as the official number of homeless people in the entire Japan. Now, in one way, this phenomenon of cyber homelessness can be seen as positive. On one hand, it helps people to avoid falling on the very bottom of the society, and it allows them to keep some level of dignity even though they don't have a home. But at the same time, the existence of the netcafe refugees demonstrates the incredible problems that the Japanese society has. A whole third of the entire Japanese workforce, over 22 million people, are part-time or temp workers, not by choice, but because they can't get a regular full-time job. Not all of them are homeless, but most of them are only paid a minimum wage. They struggle to afford a normal rent, and they have no prospects of their economic situation ever getting much better. And so even though Japan's official homelessness rate is much lower than in the US, the percentage of people living in poverty is actually higher in Japan than in the States. And while only a few end up on the street, many more end up on the fringe of the society, stuck living in cyber cafes and capsule hotels, and in a never-ending cycle of not being able to get a proper job to get an apartment, and not being able to get an apartment to get a proper job. Because of societal pressure, they prefer to remain invisible, and society prefers it as well. A problem that stays out of sight is a problem that can be easily ignored, and the government can continue to claim a 0% homelessness rate. But underneath, it is a symbol of all the things that went wrong with the Japanese economy, and a problem that's here to stay, as the number of the invisible homeless is only about to grow.
Okay, so that was a quick ending. Didn't even realize that was the end. But yeah, it was interesting. It's very interesting take on that. No, I mean it's not a take. It's probably the facts. You coming in? Come on. Oh, come on. Underneath the cable, please. And go. So here you go. There's shadow. Look at her. Yeah. What? It's kind of perplexing problem, isn't it? Homelessness seems to be on the rise pretty much everywhere, and pretty much probably it's getting higher in Japan as well. But the case that they have the net cafes and stuff like that they're actually offering them possibility of sleeping there and stuff, it's gonna makes it probably easier on some of them. Well, like he just said, it's just becoming an invisible people because they have no proper address to find a job, and they have no job to find the job that they need for getting a permanent address. Okay, that was interesting video. I'm definitely gonna subscribe to the man. Alright, thank you very much for watching, and I see you tomorrow. Bye!